I'm Fritz Klingler. They call me California Fritz out here. There used to be 3 Fritzes racing out here at Bonneville, and whenever they'd be looking for one of them, they'd say, the one from California. The name kind of stuck. I've been coming out here to Bonneville. I started 22 years ago. Brought a old shovel head out here that I was experimenting with, trying to build a big motor. It was a 120 cubic inch motor that I put together, and got out here and found out that Bonneville and the elements here a little harder to conquer than you think. I went a screaming 118 miles an hour. The record at that time was 151 miles an hour in the open bike class. What you see behind me here, this is Streamliner. I worked my way up to that, setting records over the years with the open bike. Finally conquered the 151 mile an hour record on the open bike at 163. I think I pushed the open bike is to the limits I could push it was 171 miles an hour. That record held for almost 10 years. That's with a single engine, naturally aspirated shovel head on pump gas. So it was a tough record for anybody to beat, and I brought my sons out here for years. They would play in the salt. They were young, only 8, 10 years old at the time, and as they kept coming out here every year, they got more interested and got into the bikes. And I actually got my youngest boy, Richard. He's racing, and he raced my open bike, chasing my record. I started building the Streamliner here, and we got the Streamliner going in, I believe, 2000. And my boy was on my open bike just a couple years ago, 2 years ago, and he took my record at 173 miles an hour. So it's kind of in the family. We've been running this thing here. It's got the exact same motor. It's a 120 cubic inch, 2000 cc, naturally aspirated on pump gas. And made a couple passes with this, falling down, crashing, trying to figure out how to balance it. As you can see, it's got some skid marks on it from just yesterday. Can't seem to go home with a good paint job. Actually got this thing up to 218 and established a record there in the Streamline class. Just 2 years ago, we got this Streamliner. I say we, myself. I got this thing going 228 miles an hour 2 years ago, and tried to make a return pass, but the winds came up. The winds are real sensitive with this. All the Streamliners have a tough time in the wind. Today the wind came up and we couldn't make a pass, but we're still going to try. I'm actually holding a record with this motorcycle right now at 218. But we know it'll go fast. First 2 days we got here, we couldn't race. None of the racers could race because it was raining and the salt was like a lake out here. It was soaked. Well, the wind came up, the sun came out and dried most of it out, other than the track where I start. Most of the racers here on the open or smaller bikes, they start at the 3 mile and they go 2 miles. I have to start clear back at the 0. It's a 10-mile track. It takes me at least 5 miles just to warm up to speed. So back at the 0, the water was still standing there, and I got started up. Have to tow this thing about 50, 60 miles an hour before I can actually get balanced. And I got balanced up, and when I turned the throttle, the rear wheel just started spinning in the water. So the bike got all squirrely. I got it straightened out a bit and hit it again. But by then I had pulled the landing gear up. It has little wheels on the side that keep it balanced. The landing gear was up and the rear wheel spun and it went down and flipped over 4 times. So that was an interesting little ride there. Not quite fast enough for the parachutes to deploy, so I was only going about 95 or somewhere around 100 miles an hour. So this is my dyno here. We come here every year, and that's the only way I can tell what it's really doing. So I only get a shot at this once a year. I raced at the other events, the Southern California Timing Association. We've raced at their events. But the Bub deal here, it's all motorcycles only. There's nothing but scooter trash here. And they all love each other. We get along. Like I said, we trade parts and that and lies and have a great time out here. I love it. This is my life. I've been doing this for 22 years, racing at Bonneville, and actually trying to make things go fast since I was about 6 years old. Sliding down hills on a piece of cardboard, you know. I think Bonneville's a tough place to find sponsors because there's no money actually to be won out here. It's just trophies and glory, you know, not like the IndyCar or anything like that. It's getting more popular. I've seen over 300 racers here this week. I've got an excellent crew. All of my friends, members of the Too Much Fun Club, they're actually celebrating their 30th anniversary of the Too Much Fun Club this year, and there's 6 of them from Australia. They've come out here and they all help. I can't do this by myself, and they all help with the mechanics and the you know, towing it and getting it going. I couldn't do it without my friends and my sponsors. On the track, at 212 miles an hour, I put out a parachute to slow down after I went through the timing clock, and the parachute went straight up in the air, pulled the rear wheel off the ground, and I slid for about a week through Utah. That's a pretty crazy event. My son, I've got to tell you that, when he was out here young, I think they were about, both of my boys were out here, one was 7 and one was 8, and we had a rental car that we were using on the Salt, and the kids were having fun getting in the rental car and traveling out around the Salt. We hadn't been paying attention to them, and one of the officials came over to us in our pit, and he was mad. Veins were sticking out of his neck. He was so mad. He says, "Who the hell is driving that car right there? Why was that car doing 100 miles an hour on the entry road?" And the little boys, my boys were sitting there, and I looked at them, and my youngest boy that's racing now, little Richard, he just looks up and says, "That's as fast as it would go, Dad." So the official said, "Well, I can't argue with that, but if we see that car out there again, you guys are out of here." That's when it all started for him, about 8 years old.